Now, we're going to be talking about something now that can be really difficult to talk about, also difficult to hear as well. So just to let you know that in the next few minutes, we're going to be talking about mental health and suicide. Every year on this day, the 10th of September, people around the world come together to raise awareness about how we can all work together to create a world where fewer people die by suicide. And in fact, if hearing this, listening to this affects you in any way, you can find a whole load of help, information, resources on the BBC's Action Line. Just search for BBC Action Line. I've been chatting to Sam Watling, who is part of your Menfulness, which is hosting a special event tonight. He started off by telling me how he got involved with the group.
I was a member first, so on the approach to becoming a parent, sort of about 2020, just before all the pandemic really, I'd found myself getting extremely uncomfortable, anxious, to the point of panic at times about social situations, which wasn't something I had ever experienced. You know, mental health wasn't even really on my radar. I got some support. I got some CBT via my GP to sort of deal with some of these feelings that I was having, but it didn't help me in talking to my friends and family or really coming to terms with why I was feeling that way. So I found Menfulness and was able to kind of practice having those difficult conversations, trying to unpick what's been going on when the stakes were lower. You know, it's not easy to tell your partner or your best mate that you're struggling to even explain why you feel the way that you do. So the one thing that Menfulness does well is allow those places where you know it's confidential, you know there's no judgment, you know you're surrounded by people who just want the best for you, and you can have a go at having those conversations and learning from each other about coping strategies.
And one of the most serious, one of the most difficult subjects is suicide. Where do you even start?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be one of the most important, but also one of the least talked about subjects that there is. And whilst we didn't sort of start out as a suicide prevention charity, it's obviously naturally the direction that we're going in. And we recognise we're not experts in this field. We can't help people who are in crisis, but what we can do is try and figure out how to talk about this so that it's normal. So for us, a lot of what we do day to day is a lot of our donations and fundraising are about getting people into counselling and getting people talking about this subject to a professional. So yeah, I mean, as society, I think we need to do better at asking people how they really are, and not being afraid if someone confides in you and says, actually, I've had enough, I don't want to be here anymore, rather than sort of saying, well, let's cheer this person up, or let's change the conversation because I don't want to talk about this. Is to say, wow, that sounds really, really tough. And what can we do to make sure that you're safe? And, can you tell me more about that? And knowing a little bit about where to signpost people to, if people are feeling that way, there are people trained to be able to help you, available 24/7 via the emergency services or the Samaritans. There are people there who want to help. But the problem often is that 40% of men report never having spoken to anybody about their mental health. So even though we're doing huge work in the field of the stigma around mental health generally, suicide statistics are still on the rise. And again, we're still seeing that men, when it comes to this particular topic, just don't feel safe enough to be able to tell people. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. And that's what we're doing now. I know you said it was frightening, but actually it isn't. There's nothing to suggest that talking to someone frankly about suicide will ever make them more likely to do it. All of the research points towards that it will help.
And if you want to do a little bit more to show your support, what are the right words to use?
The research suggests that you should use the word and you should ask outright, are you thinking about suicide? Because then there can be no, if someone says, well, I've had enough. That could mean I've had enough of today or of my job or this week or whatever. But actually, if you check, are you thinking about suicide? Then it might be the first time that person's ever been asked that question. It might be the conversation that they need to lead them on to the next thing. And from that point, there is all of that support out there. Like I say, the Samaritans, emergency services, just connecting people with what it is that they live for.
Do you know what I'm thinking as you're talking is not only how frightening it is to ask that question outright, blunt, straightforward, but also how frightening the answer is to hear.
Yeah. And I think that is something that you've got to protect yourself around. You've got to be in the right place. You've got to be the right person to have that conversation with someone, because, you need to be in that safe environment. But, in the last few years of being part of this charity, I've had 3 of those conversations. So I think that perhaps those conversations exist more than we know. And actually, we're just not looking for the signs. It feels frightening, but once you do it and once you open up and you let someone know that you're a safe place for them to come, then it's one of the most rewarding things that you can do. I'm grateful that you're sharing this event that we're putting on, because what we're trying to do is just normalize that conversation a little bit, get people into the habit of thinking that suicide is actually something that shouldn't be so taboo in our society, because it is such a prevalent problem.
Yeah.
We could all be preventing suicide just by having the right conversations.
Tell us a bit more about what you've got planned for this event.
We are hosting our first live podcast event. So we've got a panel of guests. We've got Alex Lancaster and Victoria Taylor, who run the Charlie Dallas Lancaster Foundation. He was well known in the city, took his own life in 2020, sadly. And that tragic loss to that family has sort of spurred them on to create this foundation that now dedicates itself to helping people with their own challenges and making sure that, Charlie's legacy lives on. We've got Frankie Sewell, one of our members, who he has lived experience himself, and he chooses to share his experience in the hope that it will help other people. And then Jack Woodham's our very own trustee. So yes, it's happening at New Iswick Folk Hall tonight, and you can get tickets by coming along. There will be tickets on the door available, so please do feel free to come along.
And for that person who is struggling at the moment and hasn't found the courage yet to speak to somebody, what can they do? What should they do?
Reach out. There are people out there that want to help. Take a big deep breath. Take that big brave step. Reach out. Speak to somebody, because we are here to help.
Sam Watling there, part of York Menfulness.